We are a part of the Mental Health News Radio Network.
You've tuned in to Rescue the Rescuer, the show that focuses on helping first responders who may be experiencing challenges such as addiction, PTSD, relationship failure, and more. We use stories of struggle and recovery to highlight successful survival strategies for those in this powerfully stressful field of work. And now, here's your host, Steven Kavalkovich.
Hey everyone, this is Steven. Thanks for joining me on the show. I'm a former paramedic in long-term recovery from addiction and post-traumatic stress disorder. I've created this podcast to help others who may be experiencing a story similar to mine find a path beyond their problems and towards a life that they deserve. Before we get started with today's episode, let's hear this short message from one of my supporters. I recently read an article that said 81% of Americans would like to become a published author. Chances are you might be one of them, right? I know I am. So what's stopping us? Writing and publishing a book takes a lot of work, can be a pain, and is expensive too, right? Not anymore. For my next book project, I've teamed up with Hassle-Free Books. They're making it easy for me to become an author. They're removing a lot of the fuss and struggle and making it smooth and simple. And it's far more affordable than you could ever imagine. Go to hasslefreebooks.com and use promo code RESCUE to receive a 10% discount off any book project. Get started right away and become a published author in as little as 45 days. That's hasslefreebooks.com. Promo code RESCUE. All right, thanks again for joining me, and let's get started with today's show. Hey folks, welcome back to another exciting episode of Rescue the Rescuer. I have a really awesome guest on tonight. He actually just informed me that he had somebody cover his shift because he said he was doing the interview tonight, which really means a lot to me, and I'm sure it means a lot to you guys out there. So I've got the Public Information Officer. His name is Andrew Shannon. He's, again, the Public Information Officer for the Code Green campaign, which I've been a diligent follower of them for a while on social media and their website. And I just think it's a wonderful organization, and seems to be very, very well known amongst in the EMS and first responder circles. So we're going to get him on here, and we're going to talk about it. So without further ado, Andrew, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I'm excited to be here.
Wow, I'm excited to have you. It's great. So let's get right into it. So the Code Green campaign was started in March of 2014. Looks like so it's like a little over 3 years old. Why don't you, if we were in an elevator and you were doing an elevator pitch to explain it, why don't you tell everybody what it is in case they haven't heard of you?
So the Code Green campaign initially started out, it was founded by a group of friends who knew each other through various online forums. And basically they noticed that everybody in that group knew of somebody or personally knew somebody who had committed or who had died by suicide in EMS or the fire service. They realized it was a lot bigger problem than just the one or two people that they knew, and that something needed to change about it. So it started off initially as a storytelling campaign. People could send their stories of bad calls or, the ghosts that we all carry around, and send in those stories, and we could share them anonymously through our Facebook page or our web page. And it's a cathartic release for the person writing the story. And it's also a way for anyone reading the story to realize they're not alone. Since the initial inception, we've also grown, and right now we are working on a lot more education. So we have a couple of classes out right now that are taught on the national level, and our next step is treatment scholarships for people who are seeking some sort of a therapy or associated costs with therapy for their injury or PTSD or any sort of mental illness that they may have.
Wow, that's that's a lot. That really is, and that's a lot of accomplishment in 3 years. And it just so happened to be, I was just eating dinner a little bit ago, and my girlfriend, we were talking about who I was going to bring on the show tonight, and I showed her the Facebook page that you guys have, and seeing that there's over, I believe it was something like 80,000 people on Facebook. And so, I mean, your reach is pretty large, and it's getting larger, I imagine, by the day. And that's pretty big organic growth in about 3 years, a little over 3 years, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. We started out super grassroots, just sharing on Facebook, people liking us, people hearing about us, word of mouth. And for the last couple of years, we've been traveling to a lot of conferences. So we go to EMS World Expo, we go to EMS Today, and then we do a lot more localized ones also.
Oh. Well, it's you said EMS World, and it's really exciting to me. This show actually just got put up on their EMS World's website and hosted on their site, and so obviously they, if they've had you guys come out to the expos and they brought this show on, which is all about awareness and advocacy, they see the need, and I mean that excites me to see that, slowly but surely, and I think more the better. Answer, I guess, is consistently we're breaking down those walls of a culture that has always had these really, really strong opinions about, I wouldn't even say strong opinions, these hidden opinions about these things, I would say.
Yeah, that's our biggest goal, is just, the awareness and advocacy. We're a bunch of A-type tough guys that are afraid to admit that we have feelings and emotions too, and that sometimes things bug us. So, yeah, I think this year there is a lot more notice to the fact that we do have high rates of mental illness and PTSD and suicide, and that's the first step. Now we're just going to have to keep working on changing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And well, you said mental, illness, and I use that moniker a lot too. And I just interviewed another gentleman from up north in Canada the other day. He does a group called After the Call, and he actually said, mental wellness issues, and even just changing the language a little bit, really, I don't know. It really just it kind of changes the attitude or the viewpoint of it when you change it from illness to wellness, even, because there's a tends to be like a negative connotation to the word illness, when in reality sometimes it's not even necessarily an actual illness. It's just dealing with life stuff. It doesn't, it's not actually a diagnosis necessarily. It's just sometimes the maladaptive coping skills, or inability to cope with things, and changing it to wellness to me just puts a positive spin. So even just like little things like that, and it just taught me, like, just changing the language that we use, and not being afraid to speak about the uncomfortable stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is something that's pretty big. I was actually just having a conversation with Anne-Marie today. She's the president of the Code Green campaign. And along the same vein, people say committed suicide. And, that's something pretty big in our, especially with the Code Green campaign, because we do some suicide tracking.
Right.
We're trying to change that. And the Associated Press, if you look at their big Rolodex of appropriate terms to use, it's supposed to be died by suicide now, because committed suicide sounds like you're committing a crime, and it makes it seem like there were absolutely zero external influences on the person who died by suicide. So when you say died by suicide, it kind of A, humanizes it, and B, destigmatizes it. So yeah, absolutely. The mental wellness thing, that is absolutely a good point.
Wow, that's, and I mean, here it is, another thing that I just learned. Just, I never thought about it with the committed part, but it does have that connotation that they did something bad. or wrong, when, we're not, anybody can fight the ethics and the morality of suicide, but when you say died by, it takes away that feelingness of it, or it adds it. I mean, when you say died by, because you put the humanity and you put a name to it, and it's just a little bit different. I love the fact that I get to talk to people like yourself and others that teach me as well, because we're always learning. And that's the other thing too, being in EMS. Now, let me just ask you this here. I know this, but for the listeners, you are an active first responder correctly, right? Or currently, right?
Yeah, so I'm a firefighter paramedic in the state of Washington. I've been a paramedic for 6 years now, and I started as a volunteer firefighter when I was 16 years old. I was an explorer in my hometown.
Yeah, it sounds like my story. I was an explorer too, so I remember that. I remember those days. Well, and I asked you that because I know when I first went into EMS training and in paramedic school, I had, an older, wiser medic tell me right when I started school, I remember him telling me, if you ever get to a point where you think you know it all, you're really dangerous. And I think that's true. And I think that's true with this stuff too. When you think that you know everything there is to know about, these mental health related issues or anything really, when you think that you can't learn something and you become closed off, you're not only a danger to yourself, but you're also a danger to others too.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a lot of the issue with our industry, especially when it comes to this topic, because we are taught just enough to think we know a lot, but we're not actually taught about, we're taught about the effects of PTSD in the sense of, we go out and we see a patient with PTSD, then this is how to treat them from the time you see them till the time you get them to the hospital. We are not taught how to see that in our coworkers. We're not taught how to see that in ourselves. And so when we think that we know what PTSD looks like, and there are over 600,000 ways that PTSD can present.
Sure.
So we have this picture of what PTSD looks like because we saw it in that one patient 3 years ago. We don't recognize that the symptoms we're presenting, although are completely different than that patient, is still PTSD. So yeah, learning is absolutely huge, and that's why we focus a lot on education and we do these classes.
Well, what's interesting is even the word or the acronym PTSD has become so ingrained in our culture, but that it's actually lost meaning. Like I just to give you an example, I was just watching a show on HBO, which is one of my favorite shows. Actually, it's Curb Your Enthusiasm. It's the guy who created Seinfeld, and in one of the scenes, his friend's daughter was going to be getting married, and he said, "Oh, what's the guy that she's marrying like?" He says, "She's like, oh well, he's a war veteran from Afghanistan. He served a couple tours there." And the very first thing he said back to her was, "Aren't you concerned about the PTSD?" Like it's become like almost like a punchline even at times.
Right, and that's not good. I mean, it's a very serious thing that definitely shouldn't be reduced to a punchline. And it's absolutely something that we need to take seriously, especially in our profession.
Absolutely. And now I want to ask you, like, if you don't mind getting a little personal a little bit, what made you decide to get involved with this? Being a paramedic for, like 5-6 years or so, as you said, what got you involved with this?
So I was just a casual follower of the Code Green campaign, and I had several really tough calls. So I wound up submitting my story to Code Green, and I was talking to one of my friends about it. And one of my friends actually knew Anne Marie, and so he introduced me to Anne Marie because he could tell that I was I was really passionate. Like I wanted to spread the word of Code Green, and I wanted to start talking about mental wellness, and I wanted to start actually doing something. So I was kind of a behind the scenes volunteer after that for about a year or so. And then they decided to promote me to the position of PIO and give me an actual title. And, since then I've been just trying to do my best to help them out wherever I can.
Well, so work now as an active first responder, I'm sure people that you work with know that you're involved with this. Do you find it to be a very positive experience with your coworkers if these things are brought up, or not so much, or do you find this is I would hope this is this is definitely my hope and wishful thinking that it opens up the doors for positive conversation?
Absolutely. So I didn't tell my chiefs for a while that I was doing this, but a bunch of the guys around the station knew. And then one day I was actually having a conversation with my chief, and he had heard of the Code Green campaign, didn't know that I was the PIO of it. He had just heard it kind of in a casual conversation with some of his chief friends. And so he was talking to me about it, and I told him that, yeah, I'm involved in it. And so we had a couple hours long conversation just about what we could do at my department to make things better, to make things more positive for the employees. That way we don't develop these stress injuries. So the overall experience, since people know who I am and know what I do, is been extremely positive. Everybody there is extremely supportive, and I do get a lot of people that come to me and, hey, I'm dealing with this right now, and I love that. I love the fact that people feel like they can talk to me about this, especially when it's such a sensitive and personal topic.
They say that pain shared is pain lessened. How would you feel if you had someone to unload your burdens with? Someone who has probably felt how you feel and been in your shoes. Someone who wants to help you to manifest dramatic and lasting change in your life. Not only do I host this show and speak around the country, I also do individual coaching and mentoring. I want to help you to climb out of the hole of isolation, despair, and hardship. Contact me at rescuetherescuer.com to set up your free, no-obligation consultation. I'm confident that together we can develop a plan that is tailor-made to you and your goals and purpose. Exactly. And that's something that I try to remind myself and others all the time is, whether you work in this field or you don't, trauma is a very personal and individual thing. And it can affect, you don't have to be responding to everybody's worst day to experience trauma. I mean, somebody cutting you off could cause trauma on the highway. It's all a matter of how your body and your mind and your makeup, your whole entire makeup responds to it. And I think for me, and I would imagine you would agree that that's one thing that I try to really drive home is it doesn't matter what your job is, what kind of uniform you wear, if you have a Chiefs hat or whatever, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, you're still a human being, and human beings, we all generally respond and react the same ways. There's like a handful of ways that we respond, react, and deal with things. Regardless of what you do, right? And for first responders, I actually think it's kind of ironic that there isn't so much mental health awareness and programs and training and programs developed within individual departments and municipalities, because the fact of what I just said, that we're all humans and we all respond, have the same amount of different responses. But now you're putting people in something where they're seeing more trauma in a week than most people will ever see in their lives. So you would think that they would actually double and triple the efforts to make sure these people are being taken care of on a mental and psychological basis.
Well, I think that goes back to two things. So it goes back to, like I said in the beginning, we're a bunch of tough A-type guys that don't want to admit that we're having problems. And then the second part is there's a lot of research coming out that shows that it's not only those big calls that affect you, it's the minutia that affects you. So we're at a constantly higher stress level just waiting for those tones to go off, right? So me and you walking down the street have different stress levels due to our personal lives. We get to the station and our stress immediately goes up because we don't know when we're going to go on our next call. And then we go on that frequent flyer that we've seen for the umpteenth time. We go on that, we go on the sick kiddo who is sick but not critical, but it still affects us a little bit. And so we're constantly getting this just beaten down by these calls. And then we see that big one. Our stress level's already at an 8, and that pushes us up over the edge. And that's when we develop stress injuries.
Yeah, no, that's a really nice way of painting that picture. And I agree that, I haven't been on an ambulance in 3 years or so. And I can still remember back when I was an explorer, back when I was 16, 17 years old, there was like 1 or 2 calls, like at the very beginning of my EMS career, that I still remember every single thing about those calls. And they weren't major, big, crazy things, but they affected me. And to this day, if I sit and think long enough about it, I'll probably start crying.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's,
they stay with you.
They do. And, obviously we both know the awful tragedy that just happened in Vegas last week. And I was inspired yesterday by watching, I guess it was CNN or MSNBC, one of the large news outlets. And they were interviewing some of the firefighters and paramedics from Las Vegas who responded to that. And they were in the firehouse interviewing these guys and getting real with them. And a couple of them were crying. And it actually, as sad as it is, it actually inspired me and made me see a sense of hope that now even the major network news is actually shining a light on the first responders.
Yeah, and that's huge. Just getting out there and showing them in such a real capacity, showing them crying. That's something that people don't see out of us. They expect us to go there, do our job, and then be ready for the next one. And for a major news network to show the fact that sometimes we're just not ready for the next one, that's big because it shows a shift in that culture.
Yeah, it's awful that it's taking these awful tragedies, these very globally awful tragedies, to shine this light. But at the end of the day, I guess it's better than the silence that's been going on for all these decades of silence, really.
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely should never have to come down to things like tragedies like Las Vegas. It should never have to come down to that to let people open up and be real. Because, like you said, there's calls that you can think back to when you were an explorer that would make you break down and cry, and that should be okay. It should be okay for me to come home back to the station from a run and be able to express my feelings about it in whatever way is appropriate at the time. It shouldn't take something like this to make everyone understand that is a normal reaction.
And go ahead. I want to hear what else you're going to say there.
Unfortunately, sometimes it does take things like this, but I'm glad that there are people that are not afraid to show their emotions, and I'm glad that the department is strong enough and has enough solidarity that they can allow him to show that emotion. I think that shows a really good cohesion there, and I think it shows a lot of support that he has at his station.
Well, there's something else that's been kind of gnawing at me to ask. a lot of the work you guys are doing, I would imagine, is with active first responders. But what about retired guys or guys are, men or women, of course, who lost their careers because of, whatever, whether it be, substance abuse or physical injury or whatever. Do you get a lot of contact and people contacting you that are not in the field anymore?
So yeah, we actually do get a fair amount of that. Most of our stories come from people who are still active duty, but several of them have said that, I lost my job because of substance abuse, or I had to quit because it just got to be too much. And we treat those stories exactly the same as somebody who has been a first responder. And we get a lot of people that message our Facebook page looking for help, and we help those people, the ex-responders, I guess, the former first responders. We help them just the same as anybody who's active duty, because just because you stop doing this job doesn't mean that those memories aren't with you. It doesn't mean that you're okay. And we want to make sure that everyone is okay.
You guys, I mean, obviously, I don't have to tell you, that this is quite an undertaking. And how many, you're a not-for-profit, correct?
We're a nonprofit.
So
we're a 501c3 certified nonprofit. That's
pretty much, that's what I figured. So that being said, how many people are on, I guess you would say, staff or working with the organization, so to speak?
So we have right now, half a dozen main contributors to it. Fiona, Anne-Marie, and myself, that's the secretary, the president, and the PIO. We do a lot of the planning. There is a board of directors. It's an advisory board that any big plans runs through that board of directors. And then the vice president of the board is involved in a lot of the decisions, and his name is Kyle. And so when we travel, it's usually Anne-Marie, Fiona, myself, and then Temple. Temple is another guy who, we just found out about us, and he actually is married to the secretary right now. But we travel together and we go to these big conferences together, and we're the main, I guess, 5 names now that I've mentioned, we're the main driving force.
Wow. So you guys are, it's a big undertaking, and I imagine it's very rewarding for you to be able to not only help in your daily job, but also to be able to, to give back to those people that, that are your brothers and sisters.
Yeah, there's definitely nothing like it when we get people that come up to us at the conferences, and they, again, they feel comfortable telling us their stories. And I think that's huge. And I hope they're comfortable enough to tell their workmates those same stories. But it's huge that they're able to open up to us, at least.
Well, I want to ask you just, another couple of things I've been thinking of before we get wrapped up here shortly. As far as what you mentioned earlier about what you guys are doing to help get folks into treatment and to help, explain a little bit more of that. We kind of glossed over it, and I meant to ask you earlier, and I kind of got lost in the other things we were talking about.
So we are doing scholarships right now, treatment scholarships, and we actually have 2 funds set up. The first one is a general scholarship fund that anybody who needs help paying for treatment, be it co-pays, inpatient treatment, any sort of a treatment, they can fill out a simple application and hopefully be dispersed funds from there to cover those costs. Because cost is a hugely, prohibitively expensive thing when it comes to mental health care. Our second fund that we have is actually a Las Vegas Responders Memorial Fund. That Las Vegas Responders Memorial Fund is going to be a dedicated fund for the next 5 years, and it specifically goes towards people who are employed by any of the first response agencies that responded to the Las Vegas shooting. So we are talking about, the ambulance employees. There were 3 ambulance companies on scene. We're talking about the fire departments. We're talking about the police departments. Anybody there who needs help can, again, fill out that simple application, and hopefully we can disperse funds for them to receive treatment to help them cover the costs of treatment.
Wow, that is amazing to me. I'm so incredibly excited to hear that you guys are, offering something like you said, which is so incredibly true about the prohibitive nature of, financial resources to get into some kind of a program. Are you working with specific programs, or how's that work?
So we are not going to specifically say you can go here or you can't go here or anything like that, because again, therapy is such a personal experience that I had to do therapy a while back. I had to I went through 4 different therapists before I finally found one that I truly connected with and could work with. And so for us to say you get to see therapist A, B, or C would be wrong on our end, because what if somebody didn't feel comfortable opening up to A, B, or C? So our funds are going to be just a general disbursement we would give to any sort of professional help, be it a copay for a therapy session all the way up to inpatient treatment and substance abuse treatment.
Now, is that, I would imagine with that being opened up and you doing that, is the response, are you guys getting a lot of requests so far for that? How's it going so far with that?
So we haven't had any requests yet so far from the Vegas funds, and then we just started the general scholarship fund also. So I think it's one of those programs that's new enough that people haven't requested yet because it's just so new. And we're definitely going to have to probably do a couple of trial and error runs before it gets working perfectly. Sure. But we're excited for people to start requesting it, because that means they're getting the help that they need.
Well, I'll tell you, for one thing, I'm really excited that we can use this platform, the show here, to spread that message. And, I'm sure you would agree that it's almost like, again, it's like a paradox. Like, we almost wish we didn't have to have something like this set up, but at the same time, it's a great thing that it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Our biggest goal is to put ourselves out of business. We would love to not be needed.
Right, exactly.
And, until that day comes, we will be here, but we truly hope that someday we are not needed anymore, and that people will have all of those resources at their fingertips, that, there won't be the stigma. There won't be the, well, I don't trust you because you've been to a therapist. There won't be any of those hurdles. There won't be the financial hurdles to getting proper mental health treatment, and that people can just do it.
Well, now with the scholarship program, is that if let's say, for instance, I contacted you guys looking to try to get into treatment somewhere, how is that a quick process? How does, I would imagine that, how does that work?
So the way the scholarship, those are kind of 2 separate things that you're asking about, and it's perfect, because we can help you find a therapist in your area. And we actually have a resources guide on our page on our website that lists different therapists in the area and different therapies in the area that you might live in. So we can help you find a counselor that will work with you, and somebody. All of the resources on our page have experience with first responders. They know what our job is. So that was a big hurdle for me, was trying to find somebody who understood the job, because for those first 3 therapists that I went through, it was, well, I don't understand why your job's so stressful. And like, you can't spend all of your time trying to explain to them why you're stressed. You
Right.
have to be able to, you have to be able to get somewhere with these therapy sessions. Otherwise, they're going to be just throwing money out the window. So
Right.
we try to make sure that all of our therapists that are listed are people who have either been in first response or who know what the job is and have worked with first responders. So the second part of that is, if you want us to find you a therapist, if you use our resources page to find you a therapist, that is perfect. Or if you find your own, that's still perfect. As long as you are working with somebody and you know that you need to go to therapy and you're now in therapy, then we will have you fill out the application for the scholarship, and we'll help cover the cost of co-pays. We'll cover the cost of out-of-pocket therapy sessions if you're going to someone out of network. There's inpatient substance abuse rehab can be up to $30,000. Plus you have travel expenses to get there if you're going somewhere out of state. And we will do our best to help cover any costs that you need help with.
Wow. That's huge. And, I don't even, I'm humbled at hearing that you guys have done so much to really not just talk about it, but to actually back it up with a lot of action and be honest. I mean, putting the money where the mouth is, and that's what's needed. Unfortunately, money does fuel that too. Unfortunately, it has to. So Andrew, listen, we got we're just about clear out of time. I just wanted to give you another minute or two to share any last parting message, any parting words you want to give to the audience, and then let everybody know exactly where to find you guys and all that stuff.
Okay, perfect. So my last big thing that I would have to say is that all of this comes down to communication and education. So communication is a two-way street. It needs to happen from the crew level up and from the supervisor level down. So, your supervisor is busy. You can't expect him to know exactly what calls put you in a bad place. So you need to be able to go to your supervisor and say, hey, that call truly affected me. And as a supervisor, they need to be able to understand that this person is not weak. This person is not broken. This person is not unable to do their job. This person just needs help right now. And that comes to education. We need to learn the signs and symptoms. That way that supervisor can look at somebody and say, they're not doing okay. Or you can look at your partner and say, they're not doing okay, and open up that communication again. So everybody needs to be able to talk. Everybody needs to be receptive to talk. And, that's going to be our biggest thing, is just making sure everybody is comfortable talking. If you guys want to get some more information about us, then our website is www.codegreencampaign.org. And then you can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/thecodegreencampaign.
Awesome. So I'll make sure we have this up in the show notes, and we're going to get this episode expedited as quick as I can get it out there, so we can spread the word and keep on doing what you're doing, Andrew. I'm honored to know you. I'm honored to have you to have taken the time to come on the show tonight. It's really been a pleasure to be able to talk with you tonight.
Well, I definitely appreciate it, and thank you for what you're doing too, man. You're definitely bringing some awareness about yourself, so don't discount that. That really means a lot to us also.
I appreciate that too, and thanks again, man. So everybody, this has been a wonderful episode with the Code Green campaign. Check them out. Rescue the Rescuer. We'll see you next week. Thanks.
Hey everyone, thanks again for listening. I really hope it'll help you or your loved one. If you get a chance, I really would appreciate it if you could head over to iTunes and Apple Podcasts and leave a review. It will really help me out in many ways. Take care everyone, and remember, you are not alone in your struggle.
I want to give a big shout out to one of our supporters, the Addictions Academy. The Addictions Academy is the world's foremost accredited trainer of addiction coaches, addiction counselors, interventionists, and international master addiction coaches, offering on-site training at your rehab or facility, live virtual classroom webinars, or on-demand classes covering an extensive availability of courses and certifications. Check them out at theaddictionsacademy.com or call Dr. Callie Estes and her team at 1-800-706-0318.
Thanks for listening to Rescue the Rescuer. For show notes and more, head on over to rescuetherescuer.com.
We are a part of the mentalhealthnewsradionetwork.com. This show is produced by James Healy of RecoveryInnovators.com. If you have a message and want to start a show of your own, contact him and let him know that we sent you.